chaos engineer at Gremlin. She is joining us for our third day of INTech's guest speaker series, and we are so honored and thankful to have you on. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. And now I'm going to give you the floor so you can begin your session. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bree, for having me. I'm gonna share my screen here. Hello, INTech. I'm very honored to be here. As I said, it's Wednesday. I live in San Francisco, California, so my morning is just starting. But I know that you've been going through this program for since Monday, and you've heard from some amazing speakers. So I'm just excited to share a little bit more upon what you guys have touched about and talk a little bit about my story. So first, I'll start with a little bit of an I'll start with an introduction about me. As it was mentioned, I work at Gremlin as a senior chaos engineer. If you're wondering what that means, I'll get to that on a later part. But I basically work on this space that we try to make sure that applications and systems are up and running. So when you know that you go on TikTok, Instagram, and things are not working, things are down, that's because their engineering team is having an incident. So I work in the space that we try to make sure to collect all the notes from those incidents to continue learning from them. And I'll get into what that actually entails. I will share that my story is a little bit untraditional, but maybe y'all relate to it. I'm not sure the ages that you guys are coming from, but at least for me, I got introduced to the space of technology at a young age, and that allowed for me to actually start writing code at the age of 13. And some other fun things about me is that I like makeup a lot. I actually used to be a little bit of a makeup blogger. So I got a lot of free, cool subscription boxes and got to try out a lot of different brands. So that was a little bit of a side project that I did. And some other things that I thoroughly enjoy is photography. I got a chance to start taking photos along the same time that I started writing code. So it allowed for me to pick up a little bit on that creativity that I was lacking when I was writing some of the code that I was doing. And I love going to the beach. That's probably one of the places that calms my anxiety a lot and is just pleasant, and it's a great place for me to reflect and think about where I've been, where I'm going to be doing next. And I also love sharing that I'm a proud Latina. I was born and raised in Costa Rica. I moved to the United States around the age of 10. And another part is that my parents are actually from Nicaragua, and I got a chance to live there a year and some months. So I always love carrying the flags proudly of where I'm from. And I've been living in the United States for a few years. So I also carry that flag too. But as I mentioned, my journey towards tech wasn't easy. It was pretty complicated and it was untraditional. So at the age of 13, I took a class that was about introduction to computers. This allowed for us to actually learn how to use programs like Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and such. And one of the other programs that we got to learn about was called Microsoft Publisher. Microsoft Publisher was something that was used to create layouts and publish websites and things like that. Well, in this platform, there was a button that said insert HTML. 13-year-old curious Anna was wondering what that button did. So she went ahead and clicked it. And then you saw a box that you can put code in. This didn't really make sense to me. So at that time, I went to a website called Altavista. And this is actually what we know as Google now in a search engine way. And I researched what is HTML, hypertext markup language. And it was one of the backbones of web development at that time. So I was like, okay, what is this? What if I copy some code from here, put it in here, and I saw how that worked. Then I got into the space of CSS, which is cascading style sheets, which in some websites is actually what makes the colors be there, what makes the prettiness, sometimes the animations. So when you were putting HTML and CSS together, you were having single applications that were really functional and gorgeous. Around this time, there was also another platform called MySpace. So you might not be familiar with MySpace, but it was a space where you can actually take this code and make pretty layouts and have like your cursor have butterflies, and being able to take these little codes and put them in a way that I was able to show my creativity passions, but at the same time, feel like I was building out of nothing was really valuable to me. So I decided to do some web design competitions in middle school. When I got to high school, I took some more um, like electives in computers. And that was because I was going through a program called the National Academy Foundation. And this focused on getting me career ready. And at that point, I wanted to be a web designer. I wanted to be a graphic designer. But I wanted more support than just the electives that I was taking. So I did a lot of self-learning, a lot of side projects. And that actually led to me to do a lot of freelancing and doing community service. So I got a chance to launch like my freelance business around 15 or 16 years old. And this meant that I was actually getting paid at that time to build websites, to do graphic design, and to actually show these cool projects that I was doing at such a young age. And one of the things about this, it was that at that time my parents were going through like a financial rough time. So by being able to have my own financial income, I was able to help out at home. I was able to save up and buy myself a computer to continue learning about tech and continue doing what I'm doing now. And that later led to me getting more internships and pursuing my degree in computer science. But I mentioned my path wasn't necessarily easy. And when I went through those internships, number one, it was understanding that, yes, I wanted to first intern at a really pretty fashion company because that was what was attractive to me. But I had also applied to other opportunities. I didn't get the fashion company and I got to work at a credit union. And in my head, I was like, why does a financial credit union need a developer? And then I learned that technology runs on so many things that I wasn't necessarily thinking about at that time. And taking that internship with the credit union was something really valuable to me because I was able to work in a really small team doing web design and so a little bit of marketing projects as like side projects too. But I had an amazing manager that really showed me what a supportive team lead is. But I also had other amazing women, Latinas that were working in this company that were, I was able to go to them and kind of like have them as mentors. And I was like, what did y'all study when you went to school? And that's when I found out about computer science. That's when I found out about computer engineering. And I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. I want to do that. And as I mentioned, because I started really young, that those conversations I started having them when I was in 10th grade, 11th grade. So when it started coming to time to apply to college and look for more internships, my resume was actually pretty built up between the credit union competitions, the freelance projects, and that really helped out because my freshman year of college, I actually got a chance to intern at Google, and that later turned into a 2-year contract working on student marketing efforts. But what is like super crazy, and it's something that I always like try to keep in mind of being grateful, is that when I was actually writing my essays to go into college, that was actually what I aspired to be. I talked about the fact that there wasn't that many Latinas working in the technology space, but I wanted to break that status quo. I wanted to bring more diversity into that space. And I wanted to work at companies like Google. And all of a sudden, I'm a freshman in college and I was getting those opportunities. And it was like, oh, all this hard work and putting in those extra hours, networking more are actually starting to show. So in the top left corner, we have little small Anna as she was going through her internship at the credit union, not knowing that everything will in my life will later be very much career driven to my first internship at Google, coming back for the student marketing onboarding, to then transitioning off to Uber and working there as a software engineer for 2 years, and followed by me with green blue hair working at Gremlin. And I also put the logos of the colleges that I went to. So as I mentioned, I decided to pursue computer science. I took the opportunity to go to my community college in Miami, Florida. And my focus was computer science, and computer engineering was going to be maybe another space that I went into later. So I had this dream of coming to California, pursuing the American dream of continuing to work at companies like Google. So I decided to transfer to the University of California at Santa Cruz. And after being at UC Santa Cruz for about 8, 9 months, I realized that I was following a degree because it's everything that my family wanted me to do. And at that moment, I had to realize that I was really depressed, I wasn't happy, and I wanted to drop out. So I had that rough conversation. I realized that I needed to be selfish and do something that was good for me, good for my career. So I left school, I moved back to Miami. I took a job with the credit union that I had been interning at. So it's good to never close those doors with anyone that you meet in a past working relationship. And as I was working at that credit union, I got that call from Uber and they were like, "Are you open to coming to intern this summer?" And then they're like, "I heard that you're currently not in school. Would you be open to coming to work in 2 weeks from now?" And I was like, "Yes, sure, I'll take that opportunity." So that later led to me moving out to San Francisco. And when I 2 months into like that internship, I told Uber, "Hey, I'm dropping out of school. I would like to be converted to full time." And that later led for me to be there those 2 years and work on different type of technology. So that brings me to the other part of my journey, is that after getting that full-time job and moving to San Francisco, it was like that big girl move of like, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm leaving home. I'm going out to California. I'm pursuing my dreams," which is definitely like really hard to have those conversations. But my mom was pretty understanding and she knew that technology was something that I have had a passion for various years. I had shown a lot of effort and things were starting to pay off. But of course, as a Latina home, like that is still really, really hard. And it's really hard to time manage having like still keeping in touch with my family. And when I moved out to San Francisco, things weren't easy, and I had to rely a lot on myself to try to stay put together. But this also led me to lead into communities that I was building within San Francisco. I had looked for organizations that focus on bringing more diversity into tech, specifically Black and Latinx. So organizations like Code 2040 was something that I consider like my second home in Silicon Valley. And as things were not necessarily the best in the industry at my job, I was able to rely on those folks to keep me up, keep me motivated. And the various times that I told them, "I'm gonna leave tech, I don't want to be an engineer anymore. I'm tired of being one of the only women in this tech space," they kept me there. They kept me, reminded me of the value that I bring to it, my story mattering a lot. And that's something that like I highly value. And now I'm still an engineer. I continue doing really awesome stuff. I mentioned that I worked on different parts of technology before. So I used to focus on building the prettiness of the websites, like what's called the front end. Then I did a little bit of the back end, that is what actually talks to the databases and talks to other applications in order to put everything together. But I then transitioned to work in the infrastructure and the systems, and that is actually putting together the computers that are running the applications that we all currently love. But as I transitioned to that, I had to learn a lot. I had to stay curious. I had to stay being up to date on all these technologies. And that later meant that I became a keynote speaker, and I also now get to travel for fun, which lets me be myself. I get to bring my whole self everywhere I go. And that means that I get to do cool things like this, where I got a chance to rock glitter makeup, a pink blazer on a technology conference that had 10,000 people. And this is like the keynote stage. And being able to have that part of, "I'm a Latina, I'm proud, I'm loud, I like pink, I like glitter, I like technology," is something that means a lot to me, because representation matters a lot. And it's something that I didn't have when I was growing up. So I kind of strive to be a role model for folks that were looking when they were young to have someone that looked like them. But I wanted to touch a little bit about the work that I do. And with that, that means going over about what this space is. So if you're familiar with Twitter and the just in general, I guess, social media, when one of your favorite applications goes down, that's usually the first place that you go and you go complain. "I can't go to the ATM and take out money. I can't check how much money is in my account right now. I can't view my Instagram. I can't go on Twitter to read my favorite news. I can't go on Macy's or buy anything, or or things like that. When these websites are going down in that space, it's considered an incident, it's considered an outage. So I work in something called chaos engineering. We help companies avoid outages and learn how their systems are working prior to things actually going wrong. So chaos engineering is the practice of thoughtful controlled experiments designed to reveal the weakness in our systems. And what this actually means is that we inject a little bit of failure into our computer, into our applications, to actually understand how we make them work better, and that's more resilient for our users to continue having a good experience, even when things actually go wrong. But that means that I actually get to say that I work on breaking things on purpose. And that's something that I think is actually really cool. And the way that we go about doing chaos engineering actually is a way that all of you might be familiar with. And that is the scientific method, where we get to look at our computers, and I'm going to call it a computer, but this is tied into a very much more complex system where various computers are called servers, and they put together data centers and they have to talk to one another. So you have architecture diagrams in the technology space that tell you how computer A talks to computer B, and they get the information from storage C. So you'll have that in a diagram, and you want to observe that system. You want to think about what is it that you believe that system works. You think that computer A talks to B, and then B gets the information from C. That is kind of when you start thinking about the hypothesis of how everything is working. And we follow the experiment kind of route. So we have created the hypothesis: what happens when I inject this failure into my system? And when I create the hypothesis, I'm now able to launch that experiment. After we launch that experiment, we want to analyze those results. What actually happens when I inject a little bit of failure into my application? How does the application work? Would my user actually be affected? And as you see those experiments be successful, you want to go ahead and expand that scope, and you want to retest it. And then you want to make sure to actually be sharing those results, because this is part of that scientific method. You want to be improving on things as you go. And the reason that this is actually really, really important, and it's actually cool that y'all get to learn about this at a young age. I didn't understand how any of this thing worked. Is because when the companies go down, like, not only are they actually losing money because they're not getting those purchases, but their employees are also not doing the job that they're getting paid to do. So the productivity is also really low. You also sometimes have to pay your customers back because your website was unavailable. And then you have the part that because everyone is on social media talking about your site being down, that actually damages your brand. And it's really hard to regain that trust with your customers. And there's another part where your employees are not going to not want to work at a company that's constantly having these outages and incidents. Part of it is because their job gets a little bit harder. They don't want to deal with constantly having to firefight and not be working on building cool features, like that's what they joined the company for. And just to give an estimate, the average company loses a lot of money, and that's actually $300,000 per every single hour that they're down. So what some of the questions that you want to ask yourself when we think about chaos engineering kind of apply also to the outside world. What happens when fire alarms don't work and no one knows there is a fire? In technology space, what happens when your computer is unhappy and is not working properly, but the computer doesn't tell anyone that it's not happening until it just turns off and it can't process any more information? Chaos engineering allows for you to know that those fire alarms are actually working. What about a national disaster happening in the city, where you actually have all your computers, your data center, your storage, and it actually might lose power? You want to think about ways that you can prevent that being your only single point of failure. How about what happens when the company that we have the images, the company that manages the computer where the images for our website are, when that goes down, is our website still gonna have our logo is a website still going to have our pretty purple background. And one of the other use cases around chaos engineering and the questions is, how do you actually prepare for those moments that matter? So let's say we're launching a new shoe online and everyone is actually trying to hop online just as we dropped it at 9 in the morning, but the website keeps on crashing. Why did that happen? How can we actually prevent that? The type of work that chaos engineering helps engineers do is actually just about that. So you get to test your fire alarms and actually prepare your team to know what to do when a real fire is actually happening and making sure that those alarms are ringing. You're also preparing to move important things from one computer to the other. So let's say there's a hurricane happening in Florida and that's where your computers are. Maybe you have another computer data center in California and you want to move everything that belongs in that computer out in Florida because you know the computers are going to lose power over to California. How do you do that? When was the last time your engineers actually had to do that? Maybe you want to think about actually having more than just one point of failure and hosting your images in more than one place. And as you prepare for those launches, you prepare for having a lot of high traffic, you want to make sure that you actually have enough computers to handle all the resources. So I'm going to skip through this. But one of the things that I wanted to leave you all with is that chaos engineering allows engineers to actually spend more time building and creating the value and less time firefighting. So they actually get to do the cool stuff that they possibly joined the company to do. And with that, I wanted to leave you with some words of advice. We know that it's hard being one of the only folks in that room that don't look like you, but you're not alone. There's many other folks that look like me that are trying to make this space better for all of you to continue being in it if you so choose to. And as I said earlier, I share my story because representation matters. When I was young, I didn't have much of this advice. And part of that was failing and getting up again and trying to figure out. So with that, I leave you with, please stay curious, constantly ask questions. Don't take no for an answer. Try to figure out a way that you can actually get that yes, but make sure to ask those questions. Something that I struggled with very much is that I didn't know how to ask questions. So I would just get stuck and I didn't know how to move forward. Go ahead and follow your passions. Make sure you follow things that you really like, whether it's technology, whether it's fashion, whether it's photography, creative writing. Being happy at what you do really, really, really matters. I want to say go ahead and also find some mentors, some community. As being part of INTech, I know that there's a community being built by you for you, but also think about ways that you can stay connected with maybe some of the speakers that are coming in, and tell us how we can actually help you continue following your passions. And the other one is that stay grounded. Whatever you decide to pursue, you want to make sure that you think about the way that you were raised, your morals, and your personality traits, and the way that you want to carry out in life. And with that is that you also want to be you. You want to bring your whole self everywhere you go, because you're different, you're unique, and that makes you amazing. So don't ever let that go. And now I'll open it up to questions and say thank you for having me. You can always email me at anna@hey.com. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram with the handle of Anna_M_Medina. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So feel free to drop in, say something. And I'd love to stay connected with y'all.
Thank you, Anna, for that presentation and this session. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. So we have a few questions from scholars that I'll ask you. So you talked a little bit about, your experience being a Latina and being in those spaces where there weren't a lot of people that looked like you. So did you ever doubt yourself because you are Latina?
There definitely was times where by being the only one, I felt less comfortable. I stopped being me. And that's kind of why I reflect, like, don't let yourself stop being you. Being you makes you unique. And by showing up and bring your whole self, even though you might be the only one, you actually might inspire the next one to be able to follow those steps.
Right. So being a chaos engineer sounds pretty interesting. So I'm kind of curious, what is the most like interesting project you've worked on?
I think part of it has been learning a lot of technologies and like constantly having to relearn things. The space that I work in is something that I hadn't gotten exposed to up until 4 years ago. So the space of systems, infrastructure, and figuring out how all that works is something that I've had to pick up slowly. So when I got to working in another space called Kubernetes, containers, which is small little virtual machines, the way that that actually works, people have certain ideas and assumptions that everything is more reliable, more resilient, and being able to actually do chaos engineering on this fast-paced world allowed for me to actually share those wins of you have to test your assumptions, things are actually going to break. And because there wasn't that many folks doing this, I was actually able to create a lot of value, and that was something that really was important to me, the fact that I was creating something for the community that they were learning from. And
Right.
I was like, hey, I was able to tell you how to make things a little bit more resilient.
Thank you for sharing that. So you spoke earlier about some passions that you have with makeup and fashion. So do you still like work on that, like even within your position now? And what are some ways that you keep up with those interests?
Yeah, so my interests have always kind of like lied on like photography, traveling, and makeup. So whenever I can, I will do my full makeup. I'll do like the fun eyeshadow looks, and I'll take them to my conference talks. I'll take them to my meetings of meeting with customers. And that's like one way I get to do it. I don't really have the bandwidth to still do a little bit of the influencer work, even though
Yeah.
it's like always in the back of my head. Maybe I should get back into it, especially during times that I'm mostly home. And another one that's like really still big, it's photography. Like I used to get paid a little bit to do photography projects, but not anymore. I don't have that bandwidth. So if anything, I still try to take my camera out like once every 2 months. I've done a little bit of photo shoots at home. I started taking photos of my plants in order to have a little bit of like a yearbook for them at some point. So trying to find ways that I can actually tie in my projects all together is a way that I actually could try to fit them in when things are really busy with work.
Right. So I have another question here. What do you enjoy most about your job?
I think that's hard because like there's a lot of things about it, but I think the ability to meet with our customers, be able to be like a public face for my company and give a lot of conference talk, that's actually something I really value. I was really shy. If you would have told me when I was 13 that I was going to be doing public speaking as part of my job, I would have said that you're talking to the wrong Anna. So I think by being able to do that public speaking, part of it is about like representation matters, but also knowing that I'm bringing a very unique perspective to spaces that are really white and very male, and my experiences are not those of folks like that. So the fact that I get to bring that to conferences and in front of our customers, I think I am really valuable by doing that.
That's great. Yeah. So I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but we have another question around the same sort of topic. How did you overcome the part where you were different and nobody else looked like you? Or maybe you can talk about a time where you really struggled with that, but you transitioned into being more confident in who you are and being able to walk into those spaces.
Yeah, my first internship at Google, it was only a class of 30 of us, and I was the only community college student in that group and the only Latina. I want to say there was a male that identified as Latinx. Um, so when I looked inside that room, there was 30 folks in that room. I'm the only person coming from community college. Every other one is coming from an Ivy League, Stanford, Princeton, MIT. And here I am. Yeah, I go to the largest community college in the United States that you've never heard of. I'm from Miami. I'm me. And it was kind of hard because you get that imposter syndrome. I don't belong here. I'm not going to a 4-year university like all of you are. And that is kind of hard to deal with when you're still upcoming and you're trying to learn and stay open-minded, because that crashes your dreams. You feel like you're incompetent, you don't belong there, you're really not going to bring value. So part of it, someone at a young age told me like, fake it till you make it. So that's kind of what I tried to do. I like brute force my way into like my first few jobs of like, yeah, I'm here, I don't think I belong here, but I'm going to pretend that I belong here, and maybe I'll finally like learn that I belong here. And that took a lot of time for me to actually realize that. And it wasn't easy. Like I had to leave Uber and burn out and end up like in a really rough place for me to realize, hey, I actually burnt out because it was a really toxic environment. I wasn't being myself. I wasn't staying grounded. I wasn't being me. So when all of that wasn't flowing with me, that's when kind of things started going sideways. But that's kind of why I like now give that advice of maybe don't fake it till you make it. Just be you. And by you having that struggle, by you knowing that you belong there, by you knowing that you're unique, your experiences are unique, you you can actually bring a lot of value just by being there.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. That's really interesting. So we're closing out soon. So is there any other final advice or message that you would like to send our scholars and our other attendees?
I think it's about being you. It's about realizing that your story is going to be very different than mine. It's going to be very different than someone else that's watching this stream. So you want to always bring your whole self. You want to represent who you are. You want to think about what do you bring to the table, whether it's your favorite food, what your mom taught you, um, the side projects that you get to do. And with that is also like continue learning. If whatever you choose to do, whether it's technology or not, you want to go in with the idea that this is something you're passionate about, and that you're willing to pick up that extra book, pick up that extra learning in order to be better than what you are today.
Awesome. Once again, this is Anna Margarita Medina, Senior Chaos Engineer at Gremlin. Thank you so much for joining us for this series. I really enjoyed it, and I know our scholars did as well. So thank you, and thank you parents and everyone else who attended this session for joining us as well. So thank you everybody, and enjoy your day.